Merry Christmas, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Josh Carr Show. Today, we will be talking about what went on in the Supreme Court in Colorado. And to be more specific, everyone knows what happened at this point. I'm going to be talking about what it means for the GOP moving forward and the reactions of some, mostly Vivek Ramaswamy, and how that could really shake out to be one of the best moves and moments that the GOP has this century. Again, and we're going to talk a little bit about, what this means for the Supreme Court in the United States as well. Really quick, before we do get into the show today, I do want to talk about our first sponsor of this podcast, Gulag America. Gulag America is a premium apparel brand for patriots. Go check them out at gulagamerica.com. If you use my code JoshCarr10, you will get 10% off. They have fantastic stuff for summer, but also for the winter months. They also have Josh Carr merch as well, so go check that out in the collections tab and then the affiliates tab. Again, long sleeves and hoodies for the cold weather. And if you need last minute Christmas gifts, they make fantastic Christmas gifts. So please go check them out. Again, that's at gulagamerica.com. Now, really quick, if you've been living under a rock, I will, in 15 seconds, summarize what happened in Colorado. But again, it's been talked about. I want to talk about what this really means, not just what happened. So, again, I'm barely going to talk about it, but really quick, 4 out of the 7 justices, so 3 voted against this, voted for Trump to be barred from the ballot in Colorado in 2024. And this is completely unprecedented. We have not had things like this happen, ever in our country, because we've never had a court rule on something. Essentially, they're ruling that Donald Trump has committed insurrection, and he's been charged for that, but he's never actually been convicted of that in a federal or state court. And so, as we'll talk about in a second, it's really interesting that they've essentially moved to bar him from the ballot, even though he hasn't been convicted of the crime that they're accusing him of doing, which is really crazy. Not to mention that, Colorado hasn't even filed any sort of lawsuit on its own. Obviously, the lawsuits are in New York, in Georgia, and then federally. But these 4 out of 7 justices apparently thought that it's okay to go against your political opponents and take them out of the ballot. Now, you know that the Republicans are actually worried about our democracy and our republic. When you really break it down to the election in 2024, it doesn't matter, because Donald Trump, and if he's not nominated and it's someone else by some miracle, no one was going to beat Colorado in the presidential election. Unfortunately, Democrats have swung that state blue. And I know some Republicans will say otherwise. It's just not true. Donald Trump lost by 13 points in 2020. That big of a swing will not happen in 2024. In 2028 or 2032, sure, maybe something could happen with some really concerted efforts in some swing areas and swing counties. But as of now, that's never going to happen. So what I'm trying to say is Donald Trump being off the ballot doesn't actually matter for the 2024 election, but it really matters for our republic and the democratic norms that we hold in our country. So we know he's going to lose, but the problem is the precedent that this is setting. Essentially, what we have is judges who are saying that you can bar people from elections simply because, you didn't like the rhetoric that they use. And again, I want to really point out this central key point, which is that Donald Trump has not been convicted of insurrection. There is a debate right now among judges and lawyers and random people like me who want to look at the Constitution, whether or not the 14th Amendment, which is kind of talking about insurrection, applies to the presidency. There's a debate there, okay? But there's no debate, almost hardly at all, even on Democrats. Liberals are not saying that most Democrats are not saying that Donald Trump should be barred from the ballot. There's really not much of an argument to be made that if he hasn't been convicted of anything, that could disqualify him from the presidency. Now, I don't personally think that matters, but I'm just saying, at least if he was convicted, there would be a little bit more weight behind something like this decision in the Supreme Court in Colorado. And so moving on to the reactions from this, Vivek Ramaswamy had the most stark reaction, and I'm going to talk about what he said and then what it could mean for the GOP moving forward, and how it could really turn into the best move for them in the decade, but also moving forward for 2024, how they could actually really win in a landslide due to this move. So Vivek Ramaswamy came out hard against this ruling. He basically called these justices corrupt, partisans, which, we know that they're appointed by partisans, but they're not supposed to necessarily be partisan, despite maybe having liberal, conservative inclinations. Vivek Ramaswamy is absolutely right. This is a blatant partisan move. And many Republicans that disagree with Vivek Ramaswamy also had the same take. But this is what Vivek Ramaswamy said on X, which is even harsher and more intense than the other candidates for president that a Republican said, or just other Republicans. He said, quote, "I pledge to withdraw from the Colorado GOP primary unless Trump is also allowed to be on the state's ballot. And I demand that Ron DeSantis, Chris Christie, and Nikki Haley do the same immediately, or else they are tacitly endorsing this illegal maneuver, which will have disastrous consequences for our country." This is what an actual attack on democracy looks like. In an un-American, unconstitutional, and unprecedented decision, a cabal of Democrat judges are barring Trump from the ballot in Colorado. And he's absolutely right. This has been their whole pitch for for the last 6 years, even longer, since Donald Trump has been involved in politics, is that democracy is at stake. Democracy is on the ballot. And what's so ironic about that is every time a democracy fails, it's because suddenly the incumbent party tries to X out the opposition. They try to literally remove them. And it's so ironic, too, because you'll hear from Democrats talking about how Republicans pander to these people like Putin or, other dictators. And this is what Putin has done to his own enemies. Putin has literally made it so that he says there's an election, but he literally kills or just bars people from elections so that he has, and it's his strongest opposition. Donald Trump is the strongest opposition to the Democrat Party, whether you like it or not. So if anybody is being undemocratic at this point, it is hands down the Democrat Party. So that's obviously just a good, observation by Ramaswamy, but the reason why this quote is actually really fascinating is because he himself has removed himself from the Colorado ballot. He wasn't tried for anything. The judges didn't bar him from the election. He literally said, if you won't let Donald Trump on the ballot, I will not be on the ballot. And then he called on all the other candidates running for the Republican primary to do the same. Here's the thing. I couldn't agree with him more. It was an absolutely great move. I understand if the other candidates who are running for the Republican primary can't just willy-nilly throw it out like Vivek Ramaswamy did. I do kind of understand the implications behind that. But all of them should get in a room together and they should absolutely talk about how they need to just unilaterally across the GOP remove their names from the Colorado ballot, because the people are mostly on the side of Donald Trump right now. Even the ones that don't like Donald Trump agree that this is a really crazy overstep by the judges in Colorado. If the GOP, the GOP through McCarthy and all this craziness happening in Congress with not being unified, that's all you've heard for years and years right at this point, is that the Republican Party is not unified. You've got the establishment, you've got non-establishment all over. If there was any time to be unified, it's right now. You're less than a year out from a presidential election. You've got some really big Senate seats up for grabs. If there's any time for the GOP to make a really big power move together and show that they are unified, it's right now. If all of those candidates with the backing of the establishment GOP said, hey, you know what? Screw you guys. We're leaving the ballot completely. It would not change the outcome of the election. And as we'll talk about, their names would still be on the ballot. We'll talk about that in a second. And it would show an incredible stick it to the corruption happening in the judiciary as well as the federal branch of the government, in the executive. And so, this is the kind of strength the GOP needs. I hope they seize it. I hope that people like Nikki Haley and Chris Christie, who are establishment Republicans, will not shoot this down. I think a Ron DeSantis would honestly be interested in doing this kind of move. I have a hard time believing that establishment Republicans like Nikki Haley are allowed to do this. I don't know if their donors will allow it, and the fancy guys in the black suits. But if they have the stones to do it, it will be a fantastic move. In my opinion, the best GOP move of this decade. It's not a high bar. They've had a bad decade, but regardless, the best move of the 2020s. Really quick, guys, before we move on, I do want to talk about how it wouldn't matter at all if they would stick together. But before we do that, I do want to talk about the second sponsor of this podcast, Smart Labels. Guys, as we head into the new year, you're going to be putting away Thanksgiving and Christmas decorations. You're obviously going to be getting out new decorations. You want to stay organized. That's why I partnered with Smart Labels. Smart Labels is a better way to organize. I'm going to walk you through exactly how it works. Essentially, you go to Amazon or Walmart, you can purchase Smart Labels. They have QR codes. Then with their free mobile app, you can download it, slap a Smart Label on a bin, and then using that QR code, you can catalog all of your decorations or anything else into that app so you know exactly what is in each bin, where the bin is, and you can organize it the way that you like it. So when you're looking for something next year, you can essentially just search that item and it's going to pop up and tell you exactly where it is. I love Smart Labels. I use it with my wife, so I definitely suggest you go check them out. Again, you can get them at smartlabels.com as well as Amazon and Walmart. Now, how does this end? Almost regardless of how the GOP moves together, this is going to end with the federal Supreme Court, we got Brett Kavanaugh, like those people, overturning this. And I honestly believe that most of the liberal justices on the Supreme Court will actually side with the conservative Supreme Court justices. I mean, there's no question that the 6 conservatives are going to go together. But the 3 that are more liberal leaning, I still think are going to be mostly unified. I would expect at least 8 justices overturning this ruling by the Colorado Supreme Court, which, again, I'm totally pro states' rights. I'm not in any way saying that the federal government should overstep in that way, but understand that Colorado is talking about something that happened federally. Colorado is talking about something that Donald Trump was charged and never indicted with. And so I believe that the Supreme Court has a responsibility to do this. I think they will as well. I don't think that they're going to interpret the Fourth Amendment that it even applies to the president. Most of the conservatives won't. If the liberals do, that's good and fine, but I still don't think that they're going to interpret it that Donald Trump is guilty of insurrection, because he's not. As much as people want to say that he is, he's not guilty of it because he hasn't been convicted yet. He may have been charged, but in our country, you are innocent until proven guilty, not the other way around. And so I believe the Supreme Court will overturn that. Donald Trump will be left on the ballot. And again, if the GOP will be smarter about it, all of them can remove themselves from the ballot and add themselves back on when when it's overturned. And maybe that's during the primary and maybe it's not and it doesn't matter anymore. But regardless, the GOP, it doesn't matter if they're on the Colorado ballot. They're not going to win anyway. And so I think it's really important that they do this in unity if they're wanting to show power. If they want to show that they're fractured, that's fine too. But Vivek Ramaswamy is a stronger candidate because of it, and I have a hard time believing that some of the other candidates wouldn't want to display that same sort of strength. Guys, I promised you a little bit of a shorter episode today. We are in the Christmas season, so I'm going to go spend some time with my family, but I appreciate you guys all watching this video. If you're looking for last minute Christmas gifts, I do have my new book out, A New Cult. I talk about some of the inner workings of the left and how they have taken over some of our biggest institutions and how they literally act as a cult, the elites at least. So you can go check out A New Cult. Again, my name is Joshua Carr. If this is the first time that you're watching, go check it out at Amazon.com. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you next time.